Hi, welcome to Innovasta, where we show you how to bring your ideas to life, no experience required. We'll show you how to use hardware and software to create your own Alexa skill today. These are frequently known as voice assistants, and it can actually take a really short period of time for you to go from not having any coding experience to creating your own Alexa skill. Let's start off with the basics of what makes up an Alexa skill. First, there's the phrase you actually say to Alexa. So in this case, that's called Alexa Kids Games. Then the Alexa skill portion interprets what you said. It interprets that you actually said Alexa Kids Games and recognizes that you're trying to run your skill Kids Games. For the purpose of this workshop, the right-hand side of the screen is going to be the Alexa skill. Behind the Alexa skill is a web service. This web service can be written in any technology on any platform. For the purpose of this workshop, we're going to use Amazon Web Services and create a Lambda web service. For the purpose of this workshop, that's going to be on the left-hand side of the screen. The common workflow for building an Alexa skill is edit the Alexa skill, edit the web service, test, and keep repeating that behavior. Some Alexa skills that are more complex need to store data, and that would normally be put in a database. This, again, can be any technology. For the purpose of this workshop, we will be using Amazon Web Services DynamoDB. These are all the pieces we're going to use for this workshop, and we'll walk you through step by step everything that needs to be done. You don't need any prior experience. To get started, we're going to create the Alexa skill. On the right-hand side of the page, we're going to say Alexa. And then we'll say Alexa Skills Kit, get started. And we'll say start a skill. And we're going to create a skill. So we're going to start with something that's common to most folks' childhoods in the US, and that's playing different kids' games. So we're going to call our skill My Kids Games Experience, and we'll say custom skill and create that skill. And for our skill, we're going to say start from scratch and choose that example. The first thing we need to choose is what phrase do we want to say to start the skill. And we're going to say play kids games. So the first thing we learn is an invocation name can't use any launch words. So verbs like play are considered launch words, so we need to pick something else. So we'll go back to what was simple before. We'll say kids games experience. Okay? And the next thing we'll do is create an intent. Think of an intent as what you would like to do. So we'll say add intent, and we'd like to play a game. And if we think back to one of our favorite games when we were kids, perhaps it was Duck, Duck, Goose. So we're going to call our intent Duck, Duck. And we'll say create custom intent. An utterance is a way to say what should someone say to start this intent. So we'd like to be able to say duck, duck, and we'll press enter to actually create that example. At this point, we are ready to go down to the endpoint section, and we'll say AWS Lambda, which is going to be the web service we're going to create, and we're going to copy the skill ID. We need the skill ID to get ourselves started with the web service. So once we've copied, we're going to transition over to the left-hand side of the screen, and we're going to say My Account, AWS Management Console, because we would like to go create a Lambda service. So if we go search Lambda, we'll click that. And we'll say create function. We're going to create from a blueprint, and we'll search the blueprint Alexa. And we'll scroll down to where it says Alexa Skills Kit Color Expert Python. And we'll click on that example and say configure. You might say, I've never coded anything before. What language am I going to be using? How do I even know what to do? For folks who haven't coded before, Python is a really easy way to get started. It reads very much like English. So all the examples today are going to be using Python. For folks who have more experience, you can really write a Lambda service in many, many different technologies, and you can feel free to use the technology of your choice here. We need to give our web service a name. So we're going to say My Kids Games Experience. And we're going to say create a new role from template. And we're going to call our role the same thing, My Kids Games Experience. The template we're looking for is called microservice, simple microservice permissions. So what we did in these steps is give our web service a name, give it the correct permissions to run, and the microservice permission, microservice is just another way to say web service. If we scroll down, key things security-wise when you're creating an Alexa skill is that your Alexa skill is talking to your Alexa web service. You don't want a rogue web service calling your web service or a rogue skill calling your web service. So this is a basic verification to make sure it's you. So what you're going to do is paste the skill ID that you copied before from the right-hand side of the page into that skill ID section, and that makes sure it's you that's calling this. If you scroll down, it's automatically copying in some code, and we're going to leave that alone for a second and say create function. And this will actually create your web service to get started. While this loads, we can transition over to GitHub. So we're at github.com/innovasta/hearme. All of the examples we're walking through today are available there with step-by-step instructions of how to use them. Again, that's github.com/innovasta/hearme. And there's a base skill that you can customize to turn into any skill, and that skill is baseskill.py. So we're going to open that file, and we're going to copy all of the text in that file. This gives us a starting place for our code in our web service. So we're copying, and then we're coming back to our web service on the left-hand side of the page, and we're scrolling down, and we're going to select all of that text and paste in the code from GitHub. If we scroll up to the section that says Get Welcome Response, we can first set what our skill should say when it starts. So we're going to say, Welcome to Kids Games Experience. And then commonly what you would say at this point is, what phrase should the person say to invoke your intent? So if we remember back, our intent was duck duck. So we can say, please, or to play duck duck goose, you can say duck duck. We'd also like to set the reprompt text. And that reprompt text, it reminds the person what to say in case they take a long time to respond. So we'll say to play duck duck goose, you can say duck duck. We can also say what should Alexa say when the skill ends. So we're going to say thank you for playing Kids Games Experience. So these actions will be what is said when Alexa starts your skill and what is said when Alexa ends your skill. So we're going to scroll down a little bit further, and we're looking for the section that says on intent. And the way you can interpret this is when the intent happens in the Alexa skill, this is what should be said, or this is what action should be taken. So the first piece of information that we need is the intent name. And that intent name is the same intent name you created before. So that's duck duck. And we're going to scroll to the right in the section that says build response. So the response is what's actually said back to the person. And so that's this to do here. And what should we say back? So as we know, commonly duck, duck, goose, we say back goose. So in between these quotes, we're going to say goose. And if we save, that will save our web service and have it be ready to test. The last thing we need from this section, in the top right-hand corner, there's an ARN. And this is the actual reference to our service. We're going to copy it. And if we go back to our right-hand side where the skill is, we need to tell the skill what web service it should call when it is invoked. So we'll paste that in, and we'll save that endpoint. So now our skill has been saved successfully and our web service is saved successfully. Now we're at the point we're all ready to test. So we're going to come back to the invocation, say save model and build model. And this will take a few seconds to finish building. While that's happening, the key pieces of information that we need to test are the invocation name, which in our case is Kids Game Experience. And we also need the intent name, which in our case, we said that you can say duck, duck. So we're going to wait for the build to finish. As a reminder, if you have any questions throughout the stream, I'd be happy to talk back and forth with you and address them if you speak in chat. All right, so our model is finished building, and we're gonna go test. So in the test section, we click to enable the test. And you might get a prompt right there that says enable your microphone. You want to say yes. There's two ways you can go ahead and test at this point. You can speak with the mic or you can type your text in. You'll note that both of these things don't require a physical Alexa or Echo device. And that's because you can fully test these with software. You don't need to make any hardware purchase at all. So we're going to try testing our skill for the very first time. And this can be a little, make you a little nervous because you're like, oh, I might break it. But remember, you're not breaking anything like physical. You're not breaking anything of monetary value. So you don't need to worry about it at all. So we're going to click and say, Alexa, Kids Games Experience.
Welcome to Kids Games Experience. To play Duck Duck Goose, you can say duck duck.
Duck duck.
Goose.
Duck duck.
Goose.
Duck duck.
Goose.
And we can keep testing here. So maybe you liked other kids games too, and you want to play more things than just Duck Duck Goose. So we're going to come back into build. And the way we can add more games is to add more intents. So we're going to say add again. And maybe your favorite kids game was Peekaboo. So we're going to add Peekaboo here. You could change this for any other game you wanted to create. You can change the words out for anything. So your Peekaboo could say Marco, or your Peekaboo could say red light. You can really make it anything here. So we'll say create. And to start this intent, we're going to say Peekaboo. And we'll click enter. And we need to save this model again and build the model again. And while that finishes building on the right-hand side, we're going to come back to the left-hand side. And we're going to add another intent for Peekaboo. So we need to copy all of the intent information from Duck Duck and paste a new line underneath. And in Python, if you're doing the else conditions, the text for that is ELIF. Else if is shortened to ELIF. So the beginning of your row that you just copied needs to say ELIF. And we're again going to use our intent name. As a reminder, our intent name was Peekaboo. And what would we like to say in response to Peekaboo? We'd probably like to say, I see you. Now, it's pretty common when you're working with an Alexa skill to accidentally mistype something, or maybe leave out some punctuation, or make a small error. So I'm going to do that to show you an example of what might happen to you if you did that by accident, and walk you through how you would troubleshoot that. So I'm going to delete the quotation marks after goose, and I'm going to save. And now I'm going to try to test my skill. So we're going to say test. Alexa, kids, games, experience.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
Okay, so this shows you it failed, and now you're probably saying, well, what did I do? What happened? What went wrong? You can't really see it from right here. So I'm going to walk you through how you might test at this point. So we're going to select the output from the right-hand side. JSON is just a fancy way to say data. So we're taking this data file, and we're going to come to the left-hand side and say configure test events. And we're going to create a new event, and we're going to call it launch, and we're going to paste in our data and say create. And we're going to try testing our service. And up top we see red, and that means it has failed, which we knew because it already told us there's a failure on the right hand side. And it says there's an issue on line 67. So we're going to scroll down and look for line 67. So it's pointing us right to the line where we knew we made a mistake for the purpose of this conversation. So at this point, it narrows you down to the line. And string is a word for a sentence or phrase of items. So I know that the phrase I typed in was goose. So now I narrowed in on my issue, and I can put my double quotes back. So I can save. And now I can try testing again. Alexa, kids, games, experience.
Welcome to Kids Games Experience. To play Duck Duck Goose, you can say Duck Duck.
Duck Duck.
Goose.
So my skill's working again, but I don't see how to ask for Peekaboo. I want to play Peekaboo, but I can't ask for that right now because it's not telling me how to do that. So if you remember from before, we were editing the welcome text. So I'm going to go back up to the welcome text and add more text for how to play Peekaboo. So we're saying the original text was to play Duck Duck Goose. You can say Duck Duck. We're going to add to the end and say to play Peekaboo. You can say Peekaboo. And we also want to change our reprompt text to remind us of that as well. So to play Peekaboo, you can say Peekaboo. All right, so we're going to save, and we're going to try again. So we're going to try Peekaboo. We're going to try testing. Alexa, kids games experience.
Welcome to Kids Games Experience. To play Duck Duck Goose, you can say Duck Duck. To play Peekaboo, you can say Peekaboo.
So we made a typo on Peekaboo. So we're going to fix that real quick. and save. And you'll find that this happens to you regularly. And just keep editing back and forth till you get to the right thing. Alexa, Kids Games Experience.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
And now we have an issue because it had already started. So we're going to reload. Alexa, Kids Games Experience.
Welcome to Kids Games Experience. To play Duck Duck Goose, you can say Duck Duck. To play Peekaboo, you can say Peekaboo.
Peekaboo.
I see you.
Peekaboo.
I see you.
Duck Duck.
Goose.
Duck Duck.
Goose.
Duck Duck.
Goose.
So you just finished building your Alexa skill that plays kids games, including Duck Duck Goose and Peekaboo. This is a basic skill that you can extend to other opportunities, such as holding a to-do list. So next we're going to try to show you how would you modify this skill in order to save additional information. And in our case, we're going to create a to-do list called 3 million things, because don't we all have 3 million things to do? And we'll walk through step by step how to make that happen. And you could extend that to many other different types of ideas to make it do your own thing and bring your own idea to life. So if we start at where we started our first skill, we're going to go back to our skills and say create skill. And we're going to create our skill called 3 million things. And we'll say custom and create skill. And we'll say start from scratch again. And we need to start with our invocation word again. So our words are going to be 3 million things. And then we need to create our intents. So just like before, we're going to say add intent. And we're first going to think about our intents in terms of English. With a to-do list, you frequently want to be able to add new things to the list and read back the whole list. So we're going to create 2 intents. The first intent is going to be add item. And we're going to say create custom intent. And what might the person say? We're going to say add a new thing. But for that new thing, we want to be able to say what was the thing. So in an Alexa skill, that's called a slot. So we're going to use a curly bracket, and we're going to say our slot is called thing. And we'll say add. So that created us a new slot for thing. And now we can click enter. All right. We need to add a second intent. And that intent is to get the items. And for that, we'd like to say, Alexa, get all my things. All right. Now we're ready to go create the web service that goes behind our skill. If you remember from before, we'll go down to endpoint, we'll say AWS Lambda, and we'll copy our skill ID. And then we'll go back to the left-hand side and we'll create our service. We're going to say create function. We'll say blueprint again. We're going to search for Alexa. And we're going to pick that same blueprint as before, the Python Alexa skill color kit, and say configure. This time, our web service is going to be called my 3 million things. And we're going to say create a new role from template again. And we're going to say my 3 million things. And we're going to use the template of microservices again. Just like before, we're going to set the Alexa Skills Kit trigger to our skill ID. And as a reminder, this is to make sure that our Alexa skill is calling our web service. And if someone else's Alexa skill calls our web service, it won't let it proceed. And we'll say create function. If we go back out to GitHub while that is loading, and we go back to the main repository, there's a to-do skill.py, and this is an example of storing data to a database. So we're going to copy that full skill. And we'll come back to our web service section on the left and delete everything that is there and paste in our skill code. All right. And just like before, the first thing we're going to do is set the welcome text. So we're going to say where it says get welcome response, we're going to give our welcome. So our welcome is welcome to 3 million things. Please add a to-do by saying, and this is where we would put the text for our invocation name. So you might forget what your invocation name was or what your intents were. You can just click on that intent to get back there. So we're going to say, by saying, add a new thing. And we said that because that is what is on the right-hand side of our page here. And then to get all of our to-dos, that was get all my things. So by saying, get all my things. And just like before, we need to update the reprompt text as well. So we're going to say by saying add a new thing, or get all to-dos by saying get all my things. And we'll take a second here to remind you that if you have any questions throughout the build, feel free to put them in chat, or you can go to @itisasta on Twitter and put any of your questions there, and I'll respond. Okay. The next thing we need to do is say thank you for using 3 million things for when someone's done using our skill. Next, we need to edit our intent. So just like before, we're adding the welcome text, we're adding the reprompt text, we're adding the text for when the skill finishes, and then we're adding the behavior or logic for what to do when someone specifies an intent. So just like before, our first intent is called add item. So we're going to change the intent name to add item. Our second intent name, so I have them backwards, so I'm going to fix it. So the first intent is get items, and the second intent is add item. So it should look just like this. The get all items is on top, and the add items is underneath. So when we add a new item, the first thing we need to look at is saving that item. So we'd like to go to this function that says save to do. So we're going to scroll down to the function that's save to do. And let's read through this in English first. It's saying look for a database that's in Amazon Web Services US East 1 and look for a table called to-dos. And then put an item in that table with the message that I had said in the Alexa skill. So our Alexa skill had that thing item. So add a new thing, the message. This message right here is that same message that I had said earlier. So we never created a database. So we need to go to Amazon Web Services. So that's aws.amazon.com, and we need to go create ourselves a table. So I'm going to say create table. And that table is called 3 million things. And our ID is going to be thing. And we'll say create. Now this can take a few seconds to create. So while that's being created, we'll come back and update the code with our actual table name. So before it said the table was to-dos, we're going to make it say 3 million things. And you could change this to anything you wanted. If you called the DynamoDB table earlier my things, you would just call it here the same thing, my things. So then we're going to check back to see if our table has been created, and it has. So it's now ready to use. If you remember, we called our ID thing, so we're going to update that as well. And we're going to save. And we'd like to give our save a try at this point. So just like before, we're going to build the model for our Alexa skill and test our Alexa skill. Before we get to that point, we need to check our endpoint and go to the top right hand of our web services screen and copy that ARN just like you did before and paste the endpoint in. We're going to say save endpoint. Go back to the invocation, save the model. Uh-oh, it failed. So it says the slot type is missing for slot thing. So we're going to come back to the thing. And the type means what type of data is someone saying when they say the thing. So we're going to search for literal. And literal means take what the person has said in the slot and use that data exactly. So an example is wash the dishes, wash the car, take out the trash. And that's what's going to be stored in this slot. So we're going to try to save the model now and build the model again. But it fails one more time. So it's a slot name thing is used in an utterance but isn't defined. So we're going to come back to add item. And because we're using literal, which could be any text that someone might say, we need to give an example of what they might say. So we're going to say, wash dishes, and put a pipe in, and that will give it an example to potentially use. So we're going to save the model again and build the model. And this time it builds successfully. And just like if you remember from before, it's going to take a few seconds to build. So we're going to need the invocation, so 3 million things, and we're going to need add an item, which is add a new thing. So we're going to, in the test, say Alexa, 3 million things, and then say add a new thing, wash dishes. So we're in test. We're enabling the skill. Alexa, 3 million things. This time it didn't recognize what I said, which is common, so I'm going to try again. Alexa, 3 million things.
Welcome to 3 million things. Please add a to-do by saying add a new thing or get all to-dos by saying get all my things.
Add a new thing, wash dishes.
There was a problem with the requested skills response.
So there's an issue, and now we need to troubleshoot where that problem is. So before, when we had the problem, we copied the data from the right-hand side of the page and used it in our web service on the left-hand side of the page. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're also going to note that the data on the right-hand side of the page has information about the intent. So it recognizes that I made an intent request to add an item and I wanted to wash the dishes. So it appropriately interpreted everything I said. So that's our first check. That part works successfully. Now we're going to go through our second check. On the left-hand side of the page, we're going to say configure test events. And we're going to say add new for the event name and paste in our data and say create. And now we're going to test. And we get red, and it says that there is an issue where it says save to do intent slots to do value. So what does this mean? It's looking for our slot that's we defined in our Alexa skill on the right-hand side of the page, and we defined our slot over there as thing. But if I look at the left-hand side of the page, it thinks our slot's name is to do. So this is what we need to go fix, and it tells us right here that it's on line 74. So we're going to scroll down and look for line 74 and change to do to thing. And we're going to save, and we're going to test again. If you don't succeed, test again. Make another change, make a test, keep going through that process. It's pretty much a work through your failures and get to success. And this time we got green and it was successful. So that would mean that we can come back to the right-hand side and try again. Alexa, 3 million things.
Welcome to 3 million things. Please add a to-do by saying add a new thing or get all to-dos by saying get all my things.
Add a new thing, wash dishes.
To-do saved.
So we successfully saved the to-do. So if that was the case end to end, we should be able to go find that to-do in our database. So we're going to come back to the left-hand side where we created the database and click on items. And we see our thing that we saved. Wash dishes was successfully saved. So our intent for ads is now end-to-end working, and it's successful. So after you add all your things to your to-do list, you want to be able to hear them all back and get a full list of everything that you have to do. So now we're going to work through the intent for getting all of the things back. So we're going to come back to our code and scroll down to the intent that says get items. So get items is calling a function that says get to-dos. So we're going to go look for get to-dos, and that's right here. So get to-dos is calling a database table that we remember we didn't call to-dos. We called it something else. Do you remember what it was? Sometimes you won't remember what it was, but it's really easy to find this data. If we come back to the database table, it says 3 million things right here. So we're going to come back and we're going to copy that. We're not going to search it. We're going to copy that and come back and we're going to paste it here. And then it's saying, look through that whole table for and get all of the items. And the code below that is adding all of the items together so it reads back as one long string. So if we had 5 to-dos, it puts all 5 to-dos together and reads them back. If we only had 2 to-dos, it would put the 2 together and provide them back. We might remember that we didn't call our ID to-do ID, we called it thing. So we're going to make that update as well, and we're going to save. And now we're ready to test. So we'd like to say, Alexa, 3 million things, get all my things. So we're going to come back to test. Alexa, 3 million things.
Welcome to 3 million things. Please add a to-do by saying add a new thing or get all to-dos by saying get all my things.
Get all my things.
Wash dishes.
So it successfully returned the one thing, but maybe I wanted to add some more. Add a new thing, go to the North Pole.
To do saved.
Add a new thing, park the car.
To do saved.
Add a new thing, change the world.
To do saved.
Alexa, get all my things.
Change the world, wash dishes, park the car and go to the North Pole.
Add a new thing, have fun.
To do saved.
Get all my things.
Change the world, wash dishes, park the car, go to the North Pole and have fun.
In testing this intent, it's now working end to end, so I was able to successfully add a number of items to my to-do list and then read back all of the items from the to-do list. Congratulations, you just finished making 2 Alexa skills. If you make 1 more, you could potentially get some free goodies that Amazon provides from time to time for getting 3 skills published in their Alexa shop. So now what? What can you do now? So one of the popular things that you can do with Alexa skills is come up with your own idea, such as a trivia game or fun facts or something that is helpful for you around your house. You can really invent anything and make the Alexa skill work through it. If you ran into any issues while creating your Alexa skill or you have any questions at all, you can ask me online on Twitter at @itisasta, or you can ask any questions here in chat. That's all for this edition of Innovasta, where you can learn how to build your own idea using hardware and software and bring it to life with no prior experience required. Tune in next time for Innovasta.